The Texans, for the first time in their history, won in Foxborough. We're going to talk about that and more on this Victory Monday edition of The Bullpen.
To throw the punches away. He floats one wide open, and there he goes. Touchdown for a Texan touchdown.
Hello and welcome to The Bullpen. As always, I am James Roy, and with me is Tom Chavarria. Tom, how are you doing this Victory Monday?
Can't be much better than a team that's 5-1, leading their division by what is like 3 games, top in the AFC. I mean, catching all the flowers from all the national media. I don't know how you can do it much better.
Speaking of the national media, I mean, RG3 said best team in Texas. Me personally, that's not good enough. The goal is bigger than that. It's nice to be the best team in Texas, but this is going to be the best team in the nation when all is said and done. So let's get into this victory. I think it's a huge turning point, and I have to start by saying this. In my Instagram DMs, I had someone write me a novel, and I appreciated it. It wasn't like in a bad way, but they wrote like, "You're always so negative. You always have something bad to say. Like the Texans can never win good enough for you." And I hope this. I see you're positive in this tweet. I hope you've really turned it around because the Texans are here and they're good. And I was like, yeah. And then I went and wrote that tweet about Dalton Schultz literally like 30 minutes later. So I was like, I feel like I'm generally positive. Like I've been defending Bobby Slowick, and there's not very many people in that camp, but he had a good game. But yeah. Let's get into this Victory Monday edition of The Bullpen. What did you see? What did you like that you saw? I mean, what did you not like that you saw? I mean, I don't know. The Texans offense looked really good. What do you think of CJ Stroud's performance in this game?
I thought it was fine. I think you have to take into context, which I think gets lost so much in so many football games, where the Texans are, who they're playing. It's really hard for teams to really get up for certain matchups. They play to the level of their competition. Doesn't matter. The sport happens all around. So for the Texans to come in and really just lay the wood to a team that, they could have easily just kind of played with. And I feel like at points of the game they did, kind of playing with your food, to quote, I want to say Stressens. He's one that says that sometimes, but
I'd believe you if that was him that said it.
It's just, I think when you look at the score, when you look at what New England has done to other teams, when you take a look at where New England has been against really good talent, I couldn't say enough good things about this Texan team. I know we strive for perfection. I know we nitpick so much, but when you look at the score and you look at who did what and so many performers that, we're going to get into, I'm pretty impressed.
I tweeted at halftime, I was like, classic Texans game. They should have pulled away and they didn't. Get your heart meds ready. It's going to be a close one. And they proved me wrong. They didn't do that, which was nice because New England is not a team, like there's levels of bad, and New England is on that level of bad that like, yeah, their defense is pretty all right. But like if you're playing a close game with New England, there's questions that need to be asked. And so I feel like the Texans did a good job of stepping up, not being just a first half team, not just putting their best foot forward in the first half and then letting off the gas. I think there was a lot of people in my inbox, speaking of people talking about how I talk about the Texans to me in my DMs, that were saying, oh, well, they should have won by 50. This was in my replies on Twitter, actually, but it was also in my DMs. They should have won by 50, but I guess 40 is good enough. And like, it made me look in the mirror and go, James, how dare you? Why are you the way that you are? Because you know how ridiculous it sounds to complain about a team hanging 40 on someone because they could have hung 50. I mean, so here's where I'm coming from, right? And I kind of tried to tweet my way through this, but I'll try and talk my way through it right now. The Texans have been a classic case of, wow, the offense came out really strong. And then the defense also did. And then when the offense, leaves them high and dry in the second half, the defense slowly erodes until we're in a game that shouldn't be this stressful. But it's close because the defense is just like, the levees in New Orleans by the end of the game, and the offense is not helping them. It's not doing anything. And so, like, with that in mind, this game was shaping up to be that script where the offense, we put 14 points up. Okay, now we're good. And then nothing. But this time they stepped up in the second half and they helped out the defense. The defense played really well this game. They had a really good game, but like 21 points is about what they've been giving up like throughout the season. And in a lesser offensive performance from the Texans, this game is a stressor because we're sitting at 27 points going, why is this a 6-point game against a team like the Patriots? But it's not. It was a 20-point game, and I'd argue that some of those late points by the Patriots, like it was a worse game at points. So I'm 100% happy with the performance. You're not going to hear me complain about the game as a whole. The Texans played like a Super Bowl contender team in this game. They handled it as they should. We got that beat down matchup that we've been looking for, and there's no reason to be mad about the game as a whole. Now, if we're looking for something to be mad about, I kind of wanted to talk about the running game first, but I'm going to segue into something that the only critique I've given, and Tom told me he's really excited to talk about this with me on the show before we started. So I really want to get into this because I want to see what Tom has to say. Dalton Schultz was targeted 8 times and caught 4 passes for 27 yards. It, to my memory, right? I haven't like rewatched the game, but and honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I was at a job, fair thing, so I was pretty passively watching. But I distinctly remember 3 plays that Dalton Schultz did not catch the ball when he was targeted. 2 of them, CJ couldn't have gotten to him better unless he walked up to him and personally placed it in his hands, and Schultz dropped it. And then the third one, also kind of the same case, but he dropped that one, and the Patriots picked it off in the end zone. It's pretty abysmal, and the sentiment is growing throughout Texans Twitter that Dalton Schultz's play has been there's a trend. It's not just this game, but like if there was ever a descriptor or what to point to when you want to see what Dalton Schultz has been this season, this game is just like encapsulates what I feel like we've gotten from Dalton Schultz so far this year. Do you think that it's a slow start like it was last year, or do you think that, well, I don't know, what do you think the issue is if there is one?
I don't think there's an issue at all. I don't know why people have to have so many stats for so many players and drive that as a reason for why they are succeeding or living up to your expectations, which are incredibly inflated in terms of Texans fans. I don't understand how you expect a team with all the mouths to feed that the Houston Texans have for a guy like Dalton Schultz to all of a sudden be a main focus of this offense, where all of a sudden I need him to go for 6 balls, 70 yards, and a touchdown every game, or he's washed. Now, in this game, to speak to this game particularly, the pass that CJ threw him in the end zone that was defended, the defender came across his arms, knocking the ball free and enabling it to be intercepted, was thrown behind him a little bit. Not bad, but to the point where it let the defender back in the play. If he leads Dalton a little bit more, obviously there's a safety coming from the other side, so that changes things. But if he throws him the same ball that Tank Dell got to begin the game, where only Tank could get it, Dalton probably scores that. And I think that if you ask CJ, he would say, I've got to put that ball in front of him a little more, because then I allowed the defender to get back into that play. The other play that I can think of that absolutely has no bearing on Dalton Schultz was a fake screen in which CJ dumps it off, hits him in the face mask, and he's not even expecting to get the football because he's blocking, but it was like instead of taking a sack. So if you take those 2 away, we're talking about 4 for 6 for 27 yards. Now, in context, what do you think Tank Dell did on Sunday?
Tank Dell caught 7 of the 9 passes thrown his way.
10.
He had 2 drops.
He had 7. He was 7 of 10.
You can't even say it was 2 drops. Honestly, I'm looking at the ESPN stat sheet, so I know he was targeted 2 additional times to what he caught. I can't say for sure because I don't have it in my memory whether or not they were catchable balls. It's just there was 2 additional balls that were thrown his way.
But the argument that he's all of a sudden that Dalton Schultz is having all these drops and he's not performing and this and that is ludicrous to me. If you told me he went 4 for 6 for 27 yards in an offense where he's option number 4, I don't care. Like, Mixon needs to get those targets. Diggs needs to get those targets. Dell needs to get those targets. Those are the ones I want to see. To me, I don't understand the gripe when it's going, okay, the drop in the end zone, if that's what you want to call it, That's a perspective thing. If you see the play and you see he get raked across the arms and then the ball comes out and the other dude makes a great play coming across, which the safety, phenomenal play by the safety. He was in the other side of the field, ranged all the way across to catch a ball. He shouldn't even have been there. So I just don't understand. If you go back to last week, Dalton had a critical catch late in that game to set them up first and goal for the eventual touchdown. Or maybe it was 2 weeks ago against Jacksonville. There are times when his number's called and he's there for them. It's just not all the time. So when you're constantly nitpicking a small sample size because he's only seeing the ball a handful of times, it's not like he's the first option in the offense. So if you want to be upset, it's like saying that Dameon Pierce should run for 10 yards every time he gets the ball. And if he has a 1 yard carry, he's washed.
To be fair, Dameon Pierce averaged like 9.8 yards per carry. He was basically running for 10 yards per carry.
And he did it all in one play. We know this. But no, there's no issue because you're like, well, the average says X, even though if you watch the game, you saw Y. So if you saw, for example, if you saw the first drive and only the first drive, do you know what Joe Mixon did in the first drive? He had 5 carries for 7 yards. If you only saw that, this offense sucks. They can't run the football. By the end of the game, he's for 132 or 102 rushing and 32 yards receiving. Like, if you're only seeing what you want to see, you're gonna be disappointed somehow, some way. Overall, for me, I think Dalton Schultz is a guy that is not asked to be a chain mover. He's not asked to go and get grabs all game long. And the fact that people want to like nitpick at points where I can say, look, he's not necessarily the focus and he's not getting targets that I think are fair to say that he's dropping. I'm going to argue it.
Yeah, when you contextualize it like that, it's less bad. I still think that in context, the drops that he had situationally were costly to the offense. But to look at the rest of the receivers, Stephon Diggs targeted 7 times, caught 6 of them, which is pretty on track with him. Dell, like I said, 7 of 9 targets, and then Mixon 2 of 3. When you bring it into that context, every receiver that was targeted at least 3 times caught at least 66% of their targets, which is better. But like I said, I feel better. Okay, you kind of swayed me a little more in your direction, but I still think that there's a common problem where, like, and it's probably because of the low volume, right? But Dalton Schultz is called on in situations that's like 3rd and 6. I'm going to target you at the chains, and I'm going to put the ball right in your breadbasket. And like, it'd be different if CJ didn't make an excellent throw the other 2 times that he did not catch it. But like, these are both throws, like the other 2, like, right? You recalled the one that I didn't, where he got hit in the helmet on a screen. That was the one that I was missing. And the interception, I'll give you that. We'll assume that the defender swept him is a good defense and not Schultz's fault at all.
I don't want you to assume. I want you to go look. I want you to go look at it because you can
I watched
see
it, but they don't give you a good angle on it. I need to catch the replay. I watched the highlight. It's from behind, so that's why I'm saying I'm gonna take your word for it because I know that you probably really paid a lot more attention. Like, I went back and looked at it, and I just don't have a good angle to know. So I'm gonna trust you on that one. But the other 2, like, if the ball is put directly in your hands in a way, like, literally, like I said earlier, CJ could not have done better unless he literally walked up to Dalton Schultz in the middle of the play and handed him the ball, and Schultz dropped it. And those 2 drops were like 3rd down plays where the offense stalled, and it almost set us up to be going down the same path that we talked about earlier, where the team kind of falls apart in the second half. But the Texans offense overcame it. And I guess that's the deeper point, which is that Dalton Schultz's critical drops shouldn't be enough to derail the entire Houston Texans offense. So it's not a root cause. It's not like the deepest issue. And you know me, I guess based off of what everyone's saying in my DMs, I'm looking for an issue. So that was the one that I found. I felt like there was other people that watched the game that agreed with me on that one. I don't think I was just pulling that one out of thin air. But thanks for setting me straight, Tom. I appreciate you on that one. I'm closer to your viewpoint after this conversation than I was before, which is proof, guys. If you just talk it out, sometimes people change. Sometimes it happens. To round out the discussion of offense, we need to cover just a couple more things. The running back room. as we said, they averaged overall 7.6 carries and 184 yards amongst all of them. Most of that obviously came from Dameon Pierce and Joe Mixon. Very little of it from anyone, considering I believe Akers had negative rushing yards when he did handle the ball. I think the rest of it was CJ. But what do you make of the performance? So to this point, the Texans' run game has gone off against the Colts, one of the worst run defenses in the NFL, and the Patriots, who have been known to have pretty good defense, but they're not the best team. So do you think that we need to wait until the Texans are really truly tested by a better team overall before we can say that the run game is going to be the saving grace of Bobby Slowick's offense? Or do you think that this is enough for us to be like, okay, Joe Mixon was the missing piece these last few weeks?
I mean, right now, what we have to work with, the only thing that we have to work with, Joe Mixon has played 2 games. In both games, he's rushed for 100 yards. In the 2 games, or the other games that he did not, there was not a 100-yard rusher. So at some point, maybe that all evens out. Maybe it's not just Joe Mixon. But as it stands right now, Joe Mixon looks like the key to what the Texans want to do on offense running the football. Dameon Pierce has been really good too. He's been really solid in the 2 games that he played. So as much as we love Cam Akers in preseason, as much as Dare has shown from time to time, maybe it's those guys' ability to make something out of nothing, or we're just not with a great enough sample size to be able to say it's them or it's not.
Yeah, and I would say personally, right, like a successful day for me for the run game is 100 total yards between Dameon Pierce and Joe Mixon. So if they're each like Dameon Pierce to 79 yards, obviously both of them got most of their yards on like 3 total runs, right? And overall, I think they carried the ball like 22 times between the 2 of them. But I think that, 15 to 20 carries between the 2 of them and 100 yards rushing, and moving the chain, showing that like on early downs, one of the biggest discussions on between Texans fans has been like, the EPA running it on first downs not good enough. Bobby Slowick needs to throw it more on first downs. Obviously, EPA stats show that those are there's not a significantly better chance the Texans move the ball through the air outside of the fact that we know CJ Stroud is really good as a quarterback. But a lot of early down runs in this game from Joe Mixon and even from Dameon Pierce were, in the 2 to 4 yard range, which is like a lot better than the Texans have done in the past. And so that's really, to me, like whole game, ideally 100 yards between the 2 of them. And, situationally, I just want the run game to be able to move the ball more than 2 yards on first down. I need a 2nd and 7 or better, like every time, basically. That's my big thing. But overall today, I felt like the run game did really good. And I think it showed that this Texans team will probably be all right without Nico Collins. I think that where Nico Collins will be missed is when they need to stretch the field late in games, when they need the explosive plays. But I think that Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs will pick that up. And that moves into the next position group, which is wide receiver. How did you feel about Diggs and Dell stepping up? And then conversely, a lot of the talk was who's going to step up into that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 position. There wasn't really clearly any. Mixon and Schultz were the next most targeted players, and they didn't necessarily light the world on fire. Mixon had a receiving touchdown, which was the bulk of his work. Hutch was targeted twice. Mechie and Hutch were the ones that were talked about for 3 and 4. What did you think of the Texans wide receiver room as a whole, and why maybe they didn't get more action?
I believe, honestly, this had a lot to do with game script. When you look at what happened overall, there were turnovers, short field. I mean, CJ only threw for 192 yards, which if I told you going into the game, how many yards does that leave outside of Tank and Stephon Diggs to really go around? If you feel like they're both going to go for 80 yards apiece, which I think is a fair number, that's 160 right there. You're talking about 32 yards amongst the rest. So, I mean, it's really different when you look at a game script where it didn't call for CJ to throw the ball a ton. I mean, yeah, he still threw the ball, I think 21 times, or 31 times, I'm sorry. But I just didn't feel like it was required. Now, in games going forward, you might see Hutch or Mechie be, more active in some of this. I really don't know that, their play this week will necessarily be a measuring stick going, well, they didn't do anything against New England. They must not be what we need. And maybe, they need to look elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the context of what the run game did definitely makes sense of the stats, and like we've talked about, like I've talked about it with Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs. Each of them did what was asked of them, and they did it at a high level. Like just because they didn't put up 100 yards receiving or blow up the stat sheet outside of like a touchdown apiece, like that doesn't mean they didn't have a good game. And I don't think anyone's arguing that. I don't think anyone believes that that's the case. I do think that between Hutchinson and Mechie, it felt like was used a lot in the run blocking game, and I think that's where he contributed, and he did a good job. I saw from what I saw. And Hutch had 2 opportunities. Just I don't really have a strong recollection of how those went, but I can imagine that they probably weren't the bestest of opportunities. I'd have to look back at that. But overall, yeah, I thought the wide receiver room did good, and I think that that's a sign of, these first few weeks, the Texans have really, looked towards the passing game, and it's led to more, I think, not inflated, right? It's not like CJ's like lighting the world on fire with 400 or 500 yards, but when you get those 300-yard passing games when the passing game is called upon, and I think that in this matchup, there was an early point in the second half where the Texans kind of went, yeah, we don't really need to do that. And that's been a lot of people's problem with Slowick is the conservative play calling, but the run game was able to actually do what Bobby Slowick wants it to do, which is close out the game. So I think overall it all makes sense. And that brings up the last topic, which is the offensive line. What were your thoughts on the performance of the offensive line during this game?
I think it was one of the best games of the season. When you look at what they were able to do as far as running the football, when you look at how clean they played relative to the rest of the games this season, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of flag issues. There wasn't a whole lot of formation issues. Obviously, Laremy Tunsil goes down, and they really don't miss a beat with Fisher. So, I mean, we saw some Kendrick Green today, or yesterday, I'm sorry. So I really feel like the offensive line really performed well. I know that I saw some stuff on social media where they felt like Shaq Mason didn't play well, but I didn't see it. I mean, I thought for the most part he did well. I think a lot of the times that CJ got into trouble, it was coverage sacks, held the ball, looking for more. So those, you just kind of tip your cap to the defense. You really would like, CJ just get rid of the football, but I understand it. He's got a great ability to extend plays and find somebody. So,
yeah, I mean, if you've ever played the game of football, I mean, all the drills, obviously I didn't play past the high school level, but, all of the drills around offensive line specifically are like, hey, we want you to hold for 5 seconds, right? So, I mean, anything past that, kudos to the defense for getting in there. But I agree with you. I felt like the offensive line did pretty good. Shaq Mason, I don't know. I felt like a lot of pressure was coming from that side. It could have been on him, but I also saw Kendrick Green in there doing a good job. I think that moving forward, the mixture of play from the guards is probably going to be a key to seeing this offense continue to succeed. Defensively, I mean, what can you not say about the defense? There's a couple turnovers. We'll start with the turnovers. So Kalen Ballhawk, as we call him, obviously played really well. Put himself in a position to make that interception. There was another one where I thought he was going to, and then there was the Daniil Hunter strip sack, and there's a few other picks throughout the game. Eric Murray, and there was a third one. I'm blanking on who had that third interception, but overall, I mean, we've talked about how important it is for this team to get turnovers. I think that was a huge part as to why the Patriots didn't put up more points. Outside of the fact that the Texans defense seemed to have their number in pretty much every way. How do you feel about the turnover battle?
I mean, anytime you win the turnover battle, there's a pretty good chance you win the football game. I believe there was only 2 picks. I think the other one was the strip sack. That was the third turnover that I think you're talking of. And then there was the one where the guy caught the pass, and then there was a punch out. That was another fumble. The team was just everywhere. I think that we've made a lot about the ability to get to the quarterback because we know how critical it is. And what I saw from this game, and kind of like going from game to game where there has been a mobile quarterback, I think the philosophy has been really different. I think they've tried really hard to contain that person and keep them from scrambling to either extend a play or to go get yards. In this game, at least early on, I felt like the Texans didn't really feel that Drake May was going to be a runner, and they really got after him, and I think they had really good success. The second half, you started him start to use his legs a little bit, and that changed the game a little bit, especially when I felt like they had like took their foot off the gas on defense. I think when it turned 27-7, I think you saw there was a drive where New England scored where it just felt like they were open the entire time, which you hadn't seen all game. And it just really felt like the Texans just kind of just like, all right, let's just get out of here. Let's take this win. You know, they're not scoring 20 points. So there was that drive. And I think D'Amico got into him because the next drive they came out and they got a turnover, and that kind of salted the game away. But as far as his defense, I mean, I don't know what there's not to love. Obviously, I don't love some of the play calling that D'Amico had. I think he set the defense up in some bad situations. Particularly, he left what's his name? I'm struggling with names all day today. Derek Stingley Jr. left him on an island right before the half. You know, man on man, then press coverage on top of that, and it was kind of like one of those like, we don't think Drake May can make that throw, and then he did, and it made Stingley look really bad. I think that's probably on D'Amico. The last thing you want to give them is a touchdown going into the half. I think he should have played a little bit more conservatively there and just made sure they didn't get anything more than a field goal. Basically, one-on-one press coverage was like literally the only shot that Drake May had to really have the time to throw the ball up because the defense was getting to the quarterback. So I put that on D'Amico more than I put that on Stingley, which is rare because I'm normally very critical of the secondary. There was a couple plays where Eric Murray, although he had that great interception, got caught in the middle of the field where there was no linebacker, no nothing, and got beat a couple times. But overall, I think this defense, when it needed to, was phenomenal. I think when it didn't need to be, you saw them get a little, passive, a little, just kind of, I don't want to say prevent because that's not the right word, but just kind of not with the same level of aggression. And maybe that is something that's a coachable moment. Like, look, we can't take plays off. We need to play, every drive the same way. We'll see.
And to that point, I mean, Derek Stingley is supposed to be like, his strength is supposed to be, man coverage. So like, and I'm not saying this is you, but I feel like a lot of Texans fans have been like, when are they going to put, Derek Stingley on an island with the best receiver? Maybe he doesn't want it. Maybe he's not about it. And then they do it and it goes poorly. And they're like, well, D'Amico set him up for failure why didn't he give him more help there? And it's like, you can't have it both ways. It's like either you want, and honestly, this was the ideal, at the time it didn't feel like it, but this is the ideal situation to put Derek Stingley in that position. Cause when it really counts, you would hope that he would make the play and be there. And to speak to that, like, I feel like D'Amico's defensive play calling is what could be the kryptonite of the Texans late, like Dan Campbell deciding to go for 2 in the playoffs and costing the Lions the ability to move on to the Super Bowl pretty much single-handedly. D'Amico's commitment to we're just going to play ball if that continues into the playoffs, which he's shown a trend to be able to adjust in the playoffs when needed. But this we're just going to line up and play ball thing could honestly be what costs the Texans if the offense stalls or is playing an okay game or it gets into a shootout. And then back to the pass rush, I felt like I agree with you that the pass rush really went off and that the assignment was different, which really set them up to be able to get after Drake May. It could also be an experience. I mean, they sacked Caleb Williams a lot. But I mean, it's just seeing them convert pressures into sacks was a promising sign, since that's been the biggest bridge to kind of come, get across. And there's a lot of people that don't like advanced stats. So this, like, just average distance to the quarterback when the ball is released is like, mythical magic that doesn't mean anything. I feel like I'm like that baseball manager that like is like, give him another inning, I can feel it. But then the next inning is like, well, analytically speaking, we're supposed to pull him and put the reliever in right now. And since we have a left-handed matchup, we will put in this pitcher. And so it varies from moment to moment, but I think that there's a healthy mix of like gut feeling and like analytics that goes into making an assessment. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is what did you see on the film? And what we saw in the film was Derek Stingley got put in a bad spot and got burned for it. I mean, that's simply put what happened. And you can draw whatever conclusion you want from that, but that is what happened, is that he was put on an island, and it wasn't Revis Island. It was, I don't know, insert cornerback that sucks here island.
Well, look, real quick, I'm normally with you on the whole Derek Stingley's that dude. We should be able to use him in that manner. For me, it just felt like with this particular team, in this particular scenario, you didn't have to do it. Like you would rather say, okay, Drake May, I need you to show me that you can go all the way down the field to get 6, as opposed to going, all right, I'm going to give you one spot to potentially have an out. And you know what I mean? Obviously, if this is the Chiefs and it's a tight game and you need to be able to deal with all these other guys, you know, all the other weapons, then yeah, you got to put him on an island. For me, the only reason that I was critical of D'Amico in that sense was because you didn't have to do it. Now, if this is saying, hey, we want to see Stingley do it, then okay, cool. But for me, I was just like, I would have bet my paycheck that Drake May was probably not going to be able to march them down and get a touchdown in that scenario with the time he had and stuff like that. And they would have settled for a field goal, which probably makes that 14-3 look a little easier for somebody like you at halftime that's going, here we go again. The Texans are going to be in a dogfight.
It's happening.
Yeah.
One touchdown game.
That field goal I think it would have made everyone go, no big deal. But the touchdown was like, it's a 1-score game.
I agree with you. And I mean, I don't know. There was some signs pointing one way, but obviously the Texans didn't go down that route. I have one more question before we kind of bring this to a close. The linebacker room. So far this season and until this point, Azeez Al-Shaair and Henry To'oTo'o were the only ones that had taken all but one snap, which went to Neville Hewitt. Azeez Al-Shaair was out at points of this game with injuries. I believe he returned. And then Henry To'oTo'o went out with a concussion. How do you feel about the Texans linebacker room moving forward? How vital is it that To'oTo'o returns? And what did you think of the group, you know, with the adversity that they faced today?
Well, on Monday, as we sit here, I do not feel great because they're going into a game with Green Bay in Lambeau where I believe that's a hot team with tons of weapons. They're a little nicked up too, but I feel like Josh Jacobs is going to be just a different animal in that building. I would feel better knowing that Henry To'oTo'o and Azeez Al-Shaair are there doing their thing because they played outstanding. They've been phenomenal. I think the linebacker room going into the season was a position of concern. I think now you look at it, and the only concern is where the hell is Christian Harris? As soon as he gets back, then you're going full steam ahead, and that's literally it for me. And I think To'oTo'o's played phenomenal. Obviously, Shaair had the flu game and balled out. I think he looked really good today too, or yesterday too. I'm sorry, and I love what I see from both of them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that ideally, and I think it's already been said that Christian Harris isn't coming back this week, but I could be wrong. Hopefully Christian Harris comes back this week and then Azeez Al-Shaair plays. That would be ideal. And then, I mean, hopefully Henry To'oTo'o comes back. Hopefully they have all three. I mean, having those three linebackers in your arsenal gives you a lot more flexibility, gives you fresh legs, gives you a group that is shown to play at a high level. So, I mean, obviously that's what I hope. There's obviously Devin White is available as a free agent, got released by the Eagles if they choose to go that route. Knowing the way that Texans have handled very clear and apparent depth needs for the team, I imagine they'll just call someone up from the practice squad that doesn't play linebacker, and they'll probably just put Jake Hansen and Neville Hewitt out there. And to that, I'll say, hey, Jordan Love, I don't know. But we'll talk about the Packers matchup next time. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. Thanks for listening to us talk Texans. If you want to watch us do it, we're on YouTube. Just search The Bullpen, a Houston Texans podcast, and we will come up. If you're watching this and you'd rather listen, we are available wherever you get your podcast. Just once again, search The Bullpen, a Houston Texans podcast, and we will pop up. On my Instagram, I'm doing a CJ Stroud jersey giveaway, and this is part of my initiative. I'm trying to push this. I got to 10K followers, and I can do a subscription. So I thought, why not try and sponsor a subscription or sponsor giveaways with a subscription? So it's just 99 cents a month. If you sign up, you'll be entered for this one. And then if you keep paying for the subscription, as more people sign up, the prizes will get bigger. So go head over to my Instagram, hit subscribe, and check it out. I'm hopeful that that'll go really well. We're up to 8 subscribers so far, which apparently, I've heard it's really hard to get subscribers on Instagram. So pretty stoked about that. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. I have been James Roy. You can find me at James Roy NFL on Twitter and at N1 Texans fan on Instagram. Tom is at TCTom1 on Instagram and at Third Coast Tom on Twitter. We have been the Bullpen, and as always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans. Thanks for tuning into The Bullpen, a Texans podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more Texans talk from The Bullpen.